My name is Lila Dawson, and last Saturday I walked into my sister's engagement party alone. Not because I had no one to bring, but because I chose to. The resort in Napa Valley was every bit as extravagant as I imagined, white drapery fluttering against marble columns, candlelight dancing on polished crystal strings of laughter echoing beneath chandeliers the size of small cars. It looked like something out of a magazine spread, and to everyone else in that room, it probably felt like a dream. To me, it felt like trial by fire. I arrived precisely at 7 as the invitation said punctual, measured, deliberate. My heels clicked softly against the tile, the only sound I seemed to be making in a room already buzzing with couples in designer gowns and made-for-Instagram suits. The woman at the check-in table scanned the guest list without looking up. When I gave her my name, Lila Dawson, she froze, her eyes flicking up with the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile. "Oh," she said, "you're the sister." Not Amber's sister, not Dr. Lila Dawson. Just the sister. The one who wasn't part of the engagement slideshow looping silently in the corner. I nodded. Yes? The sister. She scribbled something and gestured toward the back of the ballroom. "You're at table 9, straight past the stage near the indoor fountain." Translation: out of frame, out of the way. I took a slow breath and walked in, alone. And immediately I felt the room pivot. Not dramatically, not loudly, just subtly. A few heads turned, some widened eyes, most quickly turned away. I could practically hear it, the soft calculations behind polite smiles, the mental math of people trying to decide if I was a threat, a pity case, or a complete anomaly. No partner, no diamond, no kids, no stories about proposals or Pinterest boards. Just a black structured suit hair in a slick low bun, and a woman-shaped reminder that not every sister shows up like a reflection. I passed 2 of Amber's soon-to-be in-laws near the hors d'oeuvres table. One of them leaned in and asked, not quietly, "Is that the scientist one?" The other woman gave a quick glance toward me and whispered, "Yeah, the one who's still single." Their tone landed somewhere between sympathy and suspicion, like being 35 and unmarried was some unspeakable condition I had yet to confess. I didn't flinch. But I won't lie to you, I felt it. The subtle hum of exclusion, the way it clung to me, invisible but sticky like humidity before a storm. My sister Amber didn't see me come in, or if she did, she didn't let it show. She was laughing brightly beside her fiancé, Ethan Langford, heir to a financial empire I'd only read about in Fortune. Her dress shimmered, her nails sparkled. She looked like the life of a party she'd trained her whole life to star in. I wasn't jealous, just aware. Aware of the years between us, not in age, but in perception. Amber had always been the daughter who fit. The one who played piano at recitals, made straight A's, dated football captains, cried pretty tears when she got engaged. I was the one who built a data model in high school to predict cancer cell behavior. The one who turned down 3 wedding invitations last year because I was presenting at biotech conferences in Singapore, Zurich, and New York. But none of that meant anything here. Not in this room. Not to these people. Here I was, the +1 who forgot to bring someone. Here I was, the outlier. But I came anyway. Not for Amber. Not for my parents. Not to prove anything. I came for me. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't showing the world what you've built. It's standing in the middle of people who never bothered to ask and deciding to stay anyway. When I was 10, I won first place in the district science fair for building a model of a human lung using plastic tubing and a salvaged aquarium pump. My dad gave me a quick nod over his newspaper and said, "Just don't blow anything up, all right." Amber, who was 8 at the time, had drawn a crayon family portrait with hearts around Mom and Dad. Hers was pinned to the fridge by dinner time. That was our childhood in a snapshot. Amber was the soft light. I was the sharp corner. She was the kind of child people wanted to hold, compliment, dress up in little bows. She danced in recitals, made glittery birthday cards, and asked for baking sets at Christmas. She was sunshine in a dress, and my parents basked in her glow. I, on the other hand, asked for telescopes. I asked why the sky was blue, why some stars exploded, why no one ever asked me what I thought about things that mattered. I broke remote controls to understand how they worked. I read manuals instead of fairy tales. I didn't fit neatly into any of the frames hung around our home, not the photo albums, not the family roles, not the expectations. Mom used to joke that I was born with a clipboard in one hand and a mission in the other, except it wasn't really a joke. By high school, Amber was already preparing for her prom dress. I was petitioning the school board to upgrade our science lab equipment. She had a boyfriend by 16. I had a provisional patent. But no matter what I achieved, it was Amber who got the spotlight. Not everything's about achievement, Lila, my mom would say when I brought home another award. Don't let success make you hard. I wanted to ask her, what if? Not being seen is what makes you hard. I don't think they meant to choose favorites. I don't think they even realized they were doing it. But favoritism doesn't always scream, it whispers, accumulates, becomes the background noise you learn to live with. When Amber got accepted into a design program at a private college, there was a family dinner, flowers, balloons. When I got into MIT on a full scholarship, Dad told me to make sure I didn't burn out and asked how I planned to stay feminine in an all-tech world. When Amber got engaged at 25 to a local dentist named Josh, my parents threw a party with a custom cake shaped like a diamond ring. When I accepted a postdoctoral fellowship with the National Institutes of Health at 27, my mother blinked and said, "Does that mean you're moving even farther away?" Distance, it turns out, is often less about geography and more about where people choose to meet you. By the time I turned 30, Amber had divorced, then remarried, this time to someone with family money and the right last name. She fit into our parents' dinner conversations like a favorite book they'd read a dozen times. I became the interesting anecdote. The cousin would ask, "So what is it exactly that you do again?" "Something with science," my mother would say, smiling tightly. No one could quite explain what I was building, so they stopped asking. After a while, I stopped offering. When Amber announced her engagement to Ethan Langford, my parents were overjoyed in a way I hadn't seen since ever. They bought new clothes. They hosted brunches with Ethan's family. They practiced pronouncing Langford capital like it was royalty. When the invitation arrived for the engagement party, it was addressed to Ms. Lila Dawson, plus guest. In handwriting that wasn't mine, someone had crossed out plus guest and scribbled TBD. That was their way of reminding me if I wanted to fit in, I better come with someone. But I didn't. Because I've spent most of my life trying to prove I was worth the space I took up. Trying to be impressive but not intimidating. Accomplished but not too ambitious. Visible but not disruptive. I'm tired. Not of working hard. Not of building things from scratch. But of shrinking myself to ease other people's discomfort. Amber once said to me, "You just always make everything feel like a competition." And maybe she was right, because when you grow up being compared to someone who fits the mold perfectly, surviving becomes performance. Existing becomes resistance. I didn't walk into that ballroom to make a scene. I walked in because I belonged. Maybe not at their table. Maybe not in their photos. But in the life I built, the woman I've become, there's no +1 required. Table 9 was set elegantly like every other table in the ballroom, but it may as well have been in a different zip code. Tucked behind the floral arch and close to the service hallway, it was a convenient spot to put the people you didn't quite know where to place: out-of-town cousins, reluctant dates, and me. The name cards on either side of mine belonged to a second cousin I barely remembered, and a man named Carl, who, according to the whispers I overheard, was Amber's future brother-in-law's step-uncle from Scottsdale. Both looked surprised when I sat down. "Oh," said the cousin, flipping his sunglasses up onto his head. "I thought you'd be up there with the family." I offered a polite smile. So did I. The string quartet began its rendition of something classical and vaguely overproduced as waitstaff moved through the room balancing champagne towers on gleaming silver trays. I declined the first glass offered to me. My stomach already churned enough. From across the room I could see Amber and Ethan posing for pictures with his family. They looked coordinated, curated. Her dress was a soft blush pink fitted and flowing, clearly tailored. His tie matched her lipstick exactly. My sister glowed in a way that said, "I belong in every frame." And yet I couldn't help but notice that in every photo someone's hand was always resting lightly on her shoulder or her waist, like she needed framing to be complete. Amber wasn't always like that. She used to be silly, uninhibited. I remember her dancing in the living room at 9 years old, covered in glitter and chocolate frosting, begging me to join her. Back then, she didn't need an audience to feel whole. Now it seemed like she couldn't breathe without one. A distant relative in a burgundy dress leaned across the table toward me. "So, are you seeing anyone?" she asked, as if we'd been mid-conversation. "No," I replied, keeping my voice light. "Oh," she said, as if I'd confessed to something tragic. "Well, that's all right. You've always been the, career one." I nodded, letting the silence do the rest of the talking. A few minutes later, my mother appeared behind me like a ghost, conjured by awkward silence and family pressure. She leaned down and kissed the air near my cheek. "Lila," she said, drawing out the syllables as if trying them on. "I didn't see you come in." "Hi, Mom," I said. "I've been here since 7. "Oh." Her smile strained at the edges. "You look very professional." She meant it as a compliment. Maybe. I glanced down at my black suit. It was clean, sharp tailored, minimal jewelry. Hair swept back. It wasn't flashy, but it was me. Apparently being me still registered as too much. "Just don't forget to smile, okay?" she added in a hushed voice. "This is Amber's day. Try not to look too serious in the photos." I laughed, a sound without warmth. I wasn't asked to be in any. She blinked and stood up straight. "Well, I'm sure you'll sneak into one or two. Try to mingle, sweetheart." Then she was gone, drifting back to the front of the room to the circle where Amber stood surrounded by Ethan's mother and sisters, all with matching blonde hair and perfectly rehearsed expressions. I looked around. Everyone here belonged to something. A couple, a group, a narrative. I was the lone blank space, and yet there was something oddly powerful in that. I watched a group of Ethan's relatives take their seats at a nearby table. They looked over, noticed me, and then began whispering behind manicured hands. One of them said my name, my full name. I could tell by the shape of her mouth. Then one of the younger women, maybe in her 20s, tilted her head and asked, "Wait, is she the one who started that, company? The thing with the stem cells?" The other woman laughed. "No, that's someone else. Amber's sister's just some kind of doctor or something, but not the real kind." I didn't turn. I didn't correct them. Let them guess. Let them choke on the gap between their assumptions and the truth. Ethan's father stood on stage to welcome the guests, a short speech full of golf jokes and veiled brags about the family's legacy. He thanked everyone for being there, especially Amber's family for raising such a gem, and he gestured toward my parents. The camera flashed. Applause echoed. Amber beamed. I clapped too. Politely. Just loud enough to be polite. Just quiet enough to stay invisible. A waiter appeared beside me with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. As I reached for a glass of ginger ale, someone behind me muttered, "She probably brought her laptop as a date." I didn't turn around. But something in me clenched. Not because of what was said, but because of how familiar it felt. This wasn't new. This wasn't shocking. It was a cycle. Dress it up in designer gowns and chilled champagne all you want, but it was the same pattern I'd been living in since childhood. Amber shone. I confused people. Amber made sense. I asked inconvenient questions. Amber fit. I had to fight to exist. And here in this room full of curated smiles and polite mockery, the script hadn't changed. They just thought I couldn't read it anymore. I set the glass down without drinking and rose from my chair. I didn't know exactly where I was going, only that I needed air, real air, not filtered through perfume and floral arrangements. But before I could take a step, someone across the ballroom stood. Not someone. Him. Robert Langford. The grandfather. The patriarch. The man whose signature appeared on contracts worth billions. His hair was perfectly silver. His suit was navy and immaculate. His expression unreadable. He stood slowly, deliberately, and he was looking right at me. As we stepped back into the ballroom, it was like walking into a different version of the same room. Nothing had moved, but everything had shifted. People sat straighter. Eyes that had once scanned over me now followed me, like I might speak again, disrupt the carefully composed symphony of family pageantry. No one dared say a word. Robert Langford returned to his table without flourish. He didn't need it. The ripple he caused was still moving across the water. I, on the other hand, walked slowly back to my seat at table 9, though now even that felt different. I no longer looked like someone relegated to the side. I looked like someone who chose where she sat. A few people stood as if unsure whether that was now the respectful thing to do. Some lifted their glasses half-heartedly, offering polite nods. The woman in burgundy who had asked about my love life earlier gave me a nervous smile. She didn't meet my eyes. I sat down. I didn't touch my drink. I didn't need to. Amber appeared 5 minutes later. She walked fast, too fast for someone trying to seem casual. Her smile was stretched, the kind that clung to the edges of her mouth like it had been glued on. Her bouquet trembled in her grip petals, beginning to wilt at the edges. She stopped in front of me, lowered her voice, and said through clenched teeth, "What was that about?" I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean?" She hissed, her voice still laced with a veneer of calm for the sake of appearances. "With my fiancé's grandfather." "What did you say to him?" I looked at her for a long moment, not angry, not smug, just clear. Calm in a way I hadn't been in years. "I didn't say anything," I replied. "He said something." For once, someone noticed. Her mouth twitched. "You couldn't let me have one night," she said, eyes burning now. "Just one without making it about you." I almost laughed, but it came out quieter, more like a breath. "One night," I repeated. "Amber, you've had a lifetime." That hit her. Not like a slap. More like a mirror. She blinked and took a small step back. The crowd around us had started whispering again, unsure whether this was a scene worth observing or one to politely ignore. I didn't flinch. Amber, to her credit, didn't cry. She was always too careful for that. Instead, she turned without another word, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor as she walked back toward the front of the room. Her posture was still poised, but something about it was stiffer now, like her spine had been replaced with glass. A minute later, my mother appeared. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there watching me like she was waiting for a cue that would tell her how to feel. "You look beautiful tonight," she said, finally, voice soft, almost fragile. I studied her. The woman who had braided my hair for school pictures, who had sewn Amber's dance costumes, who had once asked me to please not wear black to Easter brunch. "Thank you," I said. A pause. "Then we didn't know about all that." "Zurich. The paper. Mr. Langford." "I know," I said quietly. She sat beside me now, her hands clasped in her lap, fingers fidgeting with the edge of a cocktail napkin. "We're proud of you, Lila." The words hung there like they were testing how much weight they could carry after years of silence. I looked at her. "Why now?" She blinked. "What? Why are you proud now, Mom? Because someone powerful said I mattered? Or because you finally believe I do?" Her lips parted like she was going to respond, but nothing came out. Just air. She reached for my hand instead, squeezing it like pressure could rewrite memory. I let her hold it for a second. Then I let go. The band struck up another song, a jazzy cover of a pop hit, ironically upbeat. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loudly. The room resumed its rhythm, as if nothing had happened. But it had. I could feel it in the way my chair now faced forward instead of turned away. In the way Amber no longer stole glances my way but avoided them entirely. In the way my father across the room kept adjusting his tie and stealing looks like he was trying to remember something I once told him 5 years ago about biotech. Something. The truth is, I had spent most of my adult life chasing a kind of applause that never came. I wanted my parents to brag about me the way they bragged about Amber's new kitchen remodel. I wanted my mother to mention my company's funding round the way she mentioned Amber's honeymoon plans. I wanted my father to ask about my research, not just whether I was seeing anyone. But somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting. I worked. I built. I failed. I tried again. And now I sat in the same room as them, not because I finally fit, but because I stopped needing to. They didn't clap when I launched my company. They didn't ask questions when I got published. They didn't send flowers when I received the National Innovation Award. But here they were suddenly scrambling for something to say, because someone else had applauded first. And that more than anything told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't angry. I was done. Later that night, after the toast and the dancing resumed, a junior executive from Langford Capital passed by my table. He paused awkwardly. "I didn't know you were that, Dr. Dawson," he said. I just looked at him. "You still don't." He chuckled nervously and backed away, muttering something about getting another drink. I didn't move. I just watched the room, the lights, the bodies in motion, the curated fairy tale spinning one more loop before the music faded. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt like the one who had quietly left the stage before the show got tacky. The final toast came later than expected. Dinner plates had been cleared, desserts half-eaten, and couples had already begun migrating to the dance floor. The band was preparing their next set when Ethan's father, Malcolm Langford, took the mic. He was a man who enjoyed being listened to even when he had little to say. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, raising his glass high. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate this beautiful milestone in our families' lives. To Ethan and Amber, may your future be filled with joy, growth, and shared success." Polite applause followed. Amber squeezed Ethan's hand and leaned into him with the grace of a woman who'd rehearsed this posture in front of a mirror. Malcolm continued, voice buoyed by the mild wine in his system. "And of course," he added, "we're especially grateful for the presence of so many cherished guests, friends, and family, even those who prefer the boardroom to the ballroom." A chuckle swept through the crowd, small but unmistakable. I heard it. So did Robert. The joke wasn't subtle. My eyes locked briefly with Malcolm's, who offered a smirk, like he'd just tossed a friendly jab. But it wasn't friendly. It was calculated. And beneath it, the message was clear. Don't think your little moment earlier changed the script. You're still the outlier. But he misread the room, because Robert Langford stood up again. This time, not slowly. This time, with intention. "I'd like to add something to that," he said, his voice cutting clean through the light music and the quiet hum of the guests. Every head turned. Malcolm froze mid-toast. Robert didn't raise his glass. Not yet. He looked straight ahead, then slowly toward me. "It takes very little talent to inherit wealth," he began evenly. "It takes even less to marry into it." The room stilled. Amber shifted beside Ethan, who looked like he'd just been handed a drink labeled fragile ego. "But building something from nothing," Robert continued, "that takes vision, courage, and most of all, discipline. The woman sitting at table 9 has done exactly that. She hasn't simply succeeded. She's innovated, created value where others saw nothing, led teams where others followed trends, and she's done it not in the spotlight, but under pressure most of you wouldn't last a week in." He paused. Now he raised his glass. "To Dr. Lila Dawson, for proving that respect isn't inherited, it's earned." Silence. No chuckles. No polite coughs. Just the sound of 100 recalibrating minds and one glass raised high in the air. Then slowly, almost unsure at first, people began to join him. One hand, two. A cluster of glasses lifted around the room. Even the photographer put down his camera. They toasted. To me. I didn't stand. I didn't wave. I didn't smile for show. I simply nodded. Because that moment wasn't about validation. It was about clarity. I wasn't here to be part of their story. I was here to remember I'd already written my own. When Robert sat back down, the air in the room didn't return to normal. It shifted again, but this time in my direction. I could feel it in the way conversations dipped when I walked past. In the way Ethan's mother, Gloria, avoided eye contact completely. In the way Amber's expression froze in a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. My mother. She just sat there. Her wine glass trembled slightly in her grip. She didn't raise it during the toast. She didn't clap. She just looked at me like she wasn't sure whether she should be proud or ashamed. And I understood. Because nothing in her world had prepared her for this version of me, the one who no longer needed her approval, who no longer flinched at her silences. She'd built a narrative in which I was a cautionary tale. Don't be like Lila, too cold, too focused, too alone. And now the world, her world, had flipped the script. Not because I changed, but because someone finally bothered to read the fine print of who I always was. Amber approached me one last time as I gathered my things. Her dress no longer looked as radiant. Her bouquet sagged slightly. "I didn't know he knew you," she said quietly. "Uncle Robert. I had no idea." "You never asked," I replied. Amber looked away. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It's just accurate." Her eyes flicked back up, searching for something, maybe sympathy, maybe an apology she couldn't name. "You always made me feel like I wasn't enough," she said, almost whispering. I tilted my head. "Funny. You and Mom always made me feel like I was too much." That was the last thing we said to each other that night. I didn't go back inside. Not after the toasts. Not after Amber's last words. Not after I saw the way my father avoided eye contact as I passed, holding his wine glass like it might shield him from having to acknowledge who I'd become. Instead, I walked out through the side garden, letting the music and noise fade behind me, like the closing credits of a show I no longer subscribed to. The stone path curved around the venue, leading toward the valet circle where a handful of guests were already gathering to leave. Some recognized me now, and I received a few too polite nods, a half-hearted take care, and one awkward thumbs up from a man I'm almost certain once called me Amber's older cousin. I didn't correct him. Let them keep their stories. I had my own. The air was cool and still, California's version of nightfall settling in like silk on skin. I leaned against one of the stone railings that overlooked the vineyard, rows and rows of grapes, stretching into the darkness, waiting for a new season. And for the first time that night, I exhaled. Not from exhaustion, not from pain, from release. The quiet was honest in a way the entire evening hadn't been. I stood alone, but I didn't feel alone. That used to be the thing I feared most about becoming the woman I am now, that solitude would feel like exile. But it didn't. It felt like freedom. A few minutes later, the terrace door opened again. I turned slightly and saw Robert Langford approaching, hands in his coat pockets. His tie now slightly loosened at the collar. He didn't speak right away, just stood beside me in silence, watching the same moonlight settle over the vines. "I wasn't trying to make a scene," he said after a while. "I know," I replied. "You were trying to make a correction." He smiled. "Some illusions deserve to be broken." I glanced sideways. You broke a lot more than that tonight. You deserved better than what they gave you. I let that hang there a moment before answering. I stopped expecting better a long time ago. And yet, he said you still showed up. I didn't come to be seen, I said. I came to prove I didn't need to be. He nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card, thick cream-colored embossed with gold lettering. I wasn't bluffing earlier, he said. Langford Health Tech is launching a new research initiative. I want your insight. Not a token appearance, your name on the founding charter. Your signature on the first protocol. I stared at the card in his hand but didn't reach for it. I'm not sure I'm interested, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because for the first time in a very long time, I said I'm not making decisions from resentment, or to prove something, or because someone finally looked at me. I want to choose based on clarity, not validation. He studied me, and for a long time he didn't say anything. Then quietly, that's exactly why I want you. I took the card. I'll think about it, I said. I wouldn't want you to do anything else, he replied. Then he nodded once, simple and final, and walked away into the night. I stayed. I don't know how long. Long enough for the stars to come out. Long enough for the parking lot to clear. Long enough to realize that for the first time I didn't feel the pull to explain or justify or wrap everything in a neat little bow for the sake of closure. Because I didn't need closure. I needed to choose what came next without anyone else writing the script. Eventually, I made my way to my car. I drove with the window half down, letting the night air whip across my face. I didn't play music. I didn't call anyone. I didn't scroll through texts or check emails. I just drove. There was something sacred in that silence, in not having to fill it. And as I curved along the coastal road, the city lights beginning to glow in the distance, I realized something I hadn't said aloud, but had been feeling all night. I never got the kind of family that clapped for me at science fairs, or stood in the audience at my product launches, or even remembered what I studied in grad school. But I also stopped needing them to. I stopped trying to earn what they were never willing to give. I stopped waiting for them to see me in a light that made sense to them. Because I finally saw myself in my own light, on my own terms. And sometimes the most powerful moment of your life isn't when the world finally applauds you. It's when you realize you don't need them to. 3 weeks later, I met Robert Langford again. This time, not at a ballroom or a vineyard, but in a quiet corner office overlooking downtown San Francisco, surrounded by whiteboards, models, and blueprints that actually mattered. He didn't offer champagne. He didn't ask about my family. He handed me a draft charter and said, "We're building from zero. Clean slate. But it'll only work if the foundation is real." I read every word of that document twice. And then I set it down and looked at him. "I'll do it," I said. Not to prove anything. Not for revenge. Not to redeem the version of me my family never understood. But because it was right. Because it aligned with the woman I'd fought to become. Robert simply nodded. No fanfare, no gold pens or handshake photos. Just mutual recognition, two people who didn't speak in fireworks but built systems that lit up on their own. Later that evening, as I rode the elevator down from the 39th floor, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Not just the outline of a woman in black with calm eyes and a steady gaze, but someone who had stopped asking for space and started owning it. I thought of Amber, of the toast, of the fork that dropped, the bouquet that wilted, the sentence that hung in the air. "You couldn't let me have one day." And my answer, "You've had a lifetime." I don't know if she ever understood what I meant. Maybe she didn't want to. That's the thing about people who are handed the frame, they rarely wonder who was asked to step aside to make room. I still get updates from my mother. Emails with subject lines like Amber's baby shower plans or Dad's minor surgery. Don't worry. She signs them, "Love Mom," and sometimes only, Sometimes I write back. Not out of obligation, but because I've learned to give without needing approval in return. That's the freedom I earned. The one no applause ever gave me. Not long after a new press release went out, Langford Health Tech launches regenerative initiative co-led by Dr. Lila Dawson. It trended quietly on industry boards. I received 5 meeting requests and 3 interview offers in 48 hours. I accepted none. Because I wasn't chasing noise. I was building something that would outlast it. And maybe that's what success really is. Not the night everyone finally claps, but the morning after when you wake up, look at the life you've built, and wouldn't trade it for anyone else's in the room.